Allow me to reintroduce myself.
Welcome to Game Time with Hubb, your all-access pass to the hottest stories in football, basketball, boxing, and wrestling. Whether it's game-winning touchdowns, buzzer beaters, knockout punches, or jaw-dropping suplexes, we've got it all covered. Here's your host, Hubb.
What's up, y'all? Welcome back to another episode of Game Time with Hubb. We're rolling into week 4, sitting at 33-13 for our record. We already started off the week with a W, where the Seattle Seahawks held off a late push from the Arizona Cardinals, walk away with a 23-20 victory. It was a tight game, big finish. Momentum's on our side right now with that dub, kick off the week. Now let's keep stacking wins, man. Couple big games this weekend. 1 o'clock window, you got the Philadelphia Eagles taking on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. 4 o'clock window, which is the game of the week to me, Baltimore Ravens taking on the Kansas City Chiefs. And then Sunday Night Football, Michael Parsons returned to Dallas, Green Bay Packers taking on the Dallas Cowboys. So we got the matchups, keys, week 4 picks coming up. Let's lock in. Starting off 9:30 a.m. Eastern tomorrow morning, Dublin, Ireland. Got the 2-1 Minnesota Vikings taking on the 2-1 Pittsburgh Steelers. Look, this is how I see it. If you want to bother Minnesota, you got to pound the football, right? Problem is, Pittsburgh hasn't been able to do that. They're near the bottom in rushing and 63 yards a game and sitting at 2.8 yards a carry, just 2.3 yards per carry versus neutral boxes. That's 7 defenders, if you guys didn't know. That's not enough to keep Brian Flores' defense honest. And we just watched a similar one-dimensional Bengals offense get smothered. The Steelers, look, if Tomlin's crew steals a couple possessions, that changes the math, right? Especially with Carson Wentz starting again while J.J. McCarthy is out with an ankle injury. Wentz can manage it, but if he's forced into obvious passing downs late, that's where the mistakes will happen. Now, look, explosive plays will also swing this game. Pittsburgh has given up a league high of 32 chunk plays of at least 20 yards or more passing and 12 yards or more rushing. That's a lot for this defense. Minnesota hasn't had many explosive plays yet, but Jordan Addison is back from suspension and instantly gives them some juice. The Steelers could get a lift if Deshaun Elliott and Joey Porter Jr. return, but we'll see how much they can actually play. The big thing for me in this game is, look, Minnesota chose a rookie contract path with J.J. McCarthy and Carson Wentz instead of chasing after Aaron Rodgers, who's now in Pittsburgh. It's a neutral site game, bright lights, Brian Flores dialing the pressure. It's a clean litmus test of both teams' choices. Bottom line for me, look, if the Steelers can't run the football, Aaron Rodgers becomes predictable, and Brian Flores gets the tee off with that defense. Field position and defense is going to matter to me in this one. That's how I think is going to decide it. My pick here is the Vikings. Now, moving on to our 1 p.m. slate for tomorrow, we're starting off in Atlanta, where the Atlanta Falcons at 1-2, taking on the Washington Commanders at 2-1. Right off the bat, no Jaden Daniels, no Terry McLaurin. Marcus Mariota is going to get the start again. But the real question for me is, who are the Atlanta Falcons? Week 1, they went toe-to-toe with the 4-time defending NFC South champion Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Week 2, they bullied J.J. McCarthy and the Vikings. Then last week, they got smacked around by the Carolina Panthers. Michael Penix Jr. got benched. This week for me is all about a response. Washington, they're not at full strength. Like I said, no McLaurin, no Daniels, and that tilt things for this Atlanta secondary. Even if AJ Terrell, is iffy again with that hamstring injury, defense-wise for the Commanders, they have been sturdy against the run, top 12 in yards allowed, top 10 in yards per carry, and they bulked up, the front for games like this. But you're going up against Bijan Robinson, which is a stress test for any team. There aren't many clean answers for him right now, and he can flip the field as a runner or a receiver. Calling it like it is, it's not a must win for Atlanta, but it's a must look competent for Atlanta, before the early bye. I expect Raheem Morris to push the right buttons, the offense to settle in with a cleaner plan for Penix, and a home crowd to matter too in this one. If Atlanta protects the ball and lets Bijan set the tempo, they get it right. My pick here is the Falcons. Moving on to Buffalo, with the Buffalo Bills at 3-0, taking on the New Orleans Saints at 0-3. Look, if the Saints somehow pull off a win in this one, this would be wild. The Bills are clear edges almost everywhere in this matchup. Josh Allen offense has been rolling. If there's any lane for the New Orleans Saints here to hang around, it's in the quick passing game, rhythm throws. Buffalo's defense has been most vulnerable to the quick passing game. They don't blitz much, so you can't count on free answers. Can Spencer Rattler stack patient, efficient drives for 4 quarters? Maybe one or two, but asking an 0-9 starter to trade punches with the reigning MVP for 60 minutes is a lot. The Saints defense, they haven't been generating enough big plays, and that's the last thing you want against this Buffalo Bills group here. Kellen Moore is riding with Spencer Rattler. He believes in him, think he's trending up, and the locker room is also behind him as well. So the effort is not the issue in this one. It's just that Buffalo is just clearly the better team. If you're looking for this to be like a trap game, cool, bet. Like Buffalo got New England on deck. The Bills, they might be down a few key starters and Ed Oliver, Matt Milano, and Spencer Brown. But at the end of the day, look, Josh Allen and his offense is putting up like 30 points plus per week right now. New Orleans only averaging about 15. Bottom line, look, the Saints going to fight, but this gap is real. My pick here is the Buffalo Bills. Next up, we in Detroit, where the Detroit Lions at 2-1, taking on the Cleveland Browns at 1-2. Look, Cleveland got half of the formula right. The defense is crazy. Myles Garrett wrecking the pockets. Denzel Ward is in the secondary, doing his business. Look, in the front foot for the Browns is smothering, both the run and the pass. The problem is that offense. They can't move the ball. 4.4 yards per play. The Browns aren't giving the defense any margin of error. Can they drag the Lions into an ugly game? Of course. That defense is crazy. The Lions coming in on a short week, just played on Monday night against the Ravens in a tough matchup there. So, Cleveland, unless they completely shut the door on Jared Goff, they'll need more than a last-second special teams miracle like they got last week against the Packers. Detroit's offense will stress you with motion, play action, screens, and fourth down aggression. Every snap feels like a test. If I'm Jared Goff, I'm working the matchups away from Ward, living in rhythm, and finding the soft spots in the defense. This is Cleveland's biggest defensive exam so far, and for Detroit, don't let Baltimore's hangover be the spot here. I think the Lions handle their business at home. My pick here is the Lions. Moving on to Houston, where the 0-3 Houston Texans are taking on the 0-3 Tennessee Titans. Not a lot of shine in this one. Tennessee's protection has been leaky. Cam Ward's been taking a beating so far this year. And the offense can't string explosive plays together. Houston hasn't scored much either, but the defense is playing, some winning football. They just need an offense. Tight in the red zone, steady on the scoreboard, and a pass rush that can ruin plans. The Titans are shaking things up with Bo Hardigree calling plays, hoping for a spark. Houston just made a statement move by releasing C.J. Gardner-Johnson in the secondary, and they also could be without Derek Stingley Jr. Tomorrow, but the front still hunts for them. This sets up a rough matchup for the Titans' offensive line that's already on its heels. Keep an eye out on this key matchup with Nico Collins versus L'Jarius Sneed. They both been chirping all week. If Houston protects the ball and lets the defense tilt the field, they don't need style points to close this one. I'm picking the Texans. Next up, we headed to Foxborough with the New England Patriots at 1-2, taking on the Carolina Panthers at 1-2. Look, hard game to pick, y'all. Neither team makes it easy for me to pick. Carolina's coming in off of a 30-0 beat down of the Atlanta Falcons. But one clean Sunday doesn't erase two messy weeks. New England Patriots, on the other hand, have been their own worst enemy with turnovers and flags. Yet this feels like a classic Mike Vrabel circle the wagon spot to avoid a 0-3 home start. There's real optimism that the Patriots can get back cornerback Christian Gonzalez. If he can take the air out of rookie standout Ted McMillan, who's already commanding about 35.8% of Carolina's receiving yards. But Bryce Young, on the other hand, his road resume, it is what it is. 1 win in 15 starts away from home, with 10 of those losses by a touchdown or more. And Foxborough exactly isn't a soft landing. This game gets decided in the trenches for me. Carolina likes to run the ball. New England only allowing 60.3 yards rushing per game. Strength versus strength here. And if the Pats can hold on early downs, it tilts toward a field position game. Special teams could also swing this too. You got Vrabel already been studying the Panthers' knuckleball kickoffs, but New England's return unit has to be better than what it was last week. I'm not ready to buy a Panthers turnaround off one home shutout in a tight, low-scoring game. I trust the Patriots' defense and situational football a little bit more at home. My pick here is the Patriots. Next up, we got the New York Giants at 0-3, welcoming in the LA Chargers at 3-0. Brian Daboll rolling the dice with Jackson Dart, but this is a brutal spot. Jim Harbaugh's Chargers are 3-0 with an MVP level quarterback playing right now in Justin Herbert, and a defense that's, look, they're playing phenomenal in the passing game. Top 10 in yards allowed. LA just ripped through 3 straight division wins. They travel well, play patient, they squeeze out mistakes. Could Jackson Dart spark the Giants? Of course. He brings movement and a willingness to rip throws that might wake up the offense. But against this front and this secondary, the learning curve is steep. If it were me, I lean on the vet Jameis Winston this week and bring the rookie along a little bit more slower. Hey, either way, the Chargers rush plus Herbert's efficiency is a lot to overcome right now. My pick here is the Chargers. Moving on to Tampa, one of the big games of the weekend. Tampa Bay Buccaneers at 3-0, welcoming in the Philadelphia Eagles at 3-0. Philly flew in a little early to handle the heat, but the bigger question is their identity. The passing game has been up and down, and the run game hasn't popped off behind a banged up offensive line. Saquon Barkley's grinding at a 3.3 yards a carry. That's a tough setup against Vita Vea and the Buccaneers front sitting near the top of the league in yards per carry allowed. So Jalen Hurts likely has to win it with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. Tampa Bay's secondary isn't perfect. There are throws to be had against them, beyond Jamel Dean. But Todd Bowles has historically made life hard on Jalen Hurts with pressure looks and post-snap movement. If the Eagles can't reset their run game, the Bucs can dictate with tempo, humidity, and timely pressures. The bottom line in this one for me is, look, Philly's definitely the better roster. And I've seen a lot of people pick Philly in this one based on that. But the matchup and environment, it tilts to Tampa for me. If this becomes a drop back game, my pick here is the Buccaneers. Now, moving on to our 4 o'clock window, we start off with the LA Rams at home at 2-1, taking on the 3-0 Indianapolis Colts. Look, if you're calling Indy's start a fluke, you're not watching the tape. The Colts are balanced, physical, and smart, pounding the rock, staying efficient through the air, and playing connected defense. You know, this though is their real first gut check on the road against a Rams team that does almost everything well except close out late games, with the field goals, as we saw last week in Philadelphia. A couple things for me in this one is the Rams versus Indy's 12 personnel. The Colts are ripping off 7.8 yards per play out of the two tight end looks. Do the Rams stick with lighter DB packages, or do they beef up and cut off Jonathan Taylor's lanes? The Colts front versus the Rams ground game. LA stays on schedule with a steady run game and play action style plays. If Indy has to overcommit to the run, Stafford and McVay will find the chunk gains in this game. LA brings real teeth up front, 12 sacks already, but Indy's kept Daniel Jones clean, just 2 sacks so far. That trench battle decides the mood of this game. I lean to a Rams bounce back win at home, forcing Jones to win it late from the pocket. My pick here is the Rams. Moving on to San Francisco with the Niners at 3-0, taking on the Jacksonville Jaguars at 2-1. Look, the Niners are banged up, right? Again, but they already know who they are. Shanahan's offense stays on script. The defense plays fast and mean, and they win the hitting yardage. Jacksonville's ceiling is legit, but the details haven't traveled. Drops, red zone stalls, and Trevor Lawrence pressing in second halves. With Nick Bosa out, which is huge, look for San Francisco to juice up the blitz rate. Bad news for a quarterback who's thrown too many picks versus pressure since 2021. Add in the Jags' league-leading drops, and you get drive killers that flip field positions. If Jacksonville protects the ball and cleans the catch point, they can absolutely scare the upset. I just haven't seen, that 4-quarter consistency yet, and especially on the road. My pick here, 49. Up game of the week for me, Kansas City Chiefs at home, 1-2, welcoming in the Baltimore Ravens, 1-2. Look, as crazy as it is, one of these teams is about to be 1-3 tomorrow. By the end of the night, one of these teams is going to be 1-3. Kansas City spent the offseason selling an aerial reboot, but through 3 weeks, the offense still, feels tight. Missing Xavier Worthy early and Rashee Rice to suspension hasn't helped. and the run game hasn't brought any juice. Hard to threaten the Ravens front that just saw Detroit mash on Monday and won't want to repeat. Even if Worthy suits up, which he will, I don't think one speedster flips the whole script overnight for Kansas City. This should be a one-score late possession game. Both teams have positive point differentials despite the records. Mahomes has historically cooked Baltimore, no doubt, but right now the Ravens, look deeper and healthier. They're coming off two razor-thin losses to legit contenders, Bills and Lions. I don't see them dropping a third straight to a shorthand Chiefs attack. Bottom line, look, Baltimore's balance travels. Kansas City offense is still searching. I don't like the pick here because I don't really trust Baltimore here because they had really pretty much like messed the bed against two other contenders in like big games here, the Bills and the Lions. But just based off of how I seen this Chiefs offense work, and I'm not fully sold until Rashee Rice gets back, like Xavier Worthy coming back, bet. Like that's good. Hollywood Brown still has to step up. Tyquan Thornton has coming on a little bit. Juju Smith-Schuster got to step up. Travis Kelce, he's not what he used to be, but he got to step up. So in this one, I got to lean with Baltimore here. I'm picking the Ravens. Next up, we're going to Vegas, where the Raiders are 1-2, welcoming in the Chicago Bears at 1-2. Look, last week finally gave us something real to hang our hat on in Chicago. Ben Johnson's plan plus Caleb Williams' execution equals a clean double-digit win. I'm not crowning a new era off one game, but the pairing clearly works. Vegas is trickier. The passing volume is there with Geno Smith. He keeps finding Jacoby Myers, Brock Bowers, and Trey Tucker, but the offensive line isn't protecting or opening lanes for Aston Genty. That's why the box score looks better than the scoreboard. But the Bears, defense, it has been leaky. Too many explosive plays allowed, ugly yards per play. Listen, and the role splits with Williams aren't pretty here. But Chicago's pass catchers give him answers, and the Raiders' pass defense hasn't scared anybody. If protection holds up even good enough, the Bears can live in manageable downs and let Williams pick at soft spots in his defense. On the other side, Vegas needs its offensive line to show up because without Tom or a run game, it's hard to keep pace with other teams. Bottom line, I trust Chicago's ascending quarterback play, offensive coordinator combo here. Then I trust the Raiders' protection right now. So my pick, the Bears. Moving on, Sunday Night Football. Look, 1-2, Mike is coming for you. Look, Green Bay Packers at 2-1, traveling, take on the Dallas Cowboys at 1-2. Look, Green Bay's O-line is hanging on with duct tape. They got some injuries over there. Zach Tom, oblique, and Aaron Banks, growing, both left last week's game. Jordan Love saw a career high 42% pressure rate, and Josh Jacobs had nowhere to go, 16 for 30. Elton Jenkins, owned it. He said he got to play better, but in reality, the protection has to stabilize fast for them. The good news for the Pack, look, Dallas defense hasn't been a turnstile since the Michael Parsons trade. Dead last against the pass, bottom tier on third down, and they've already been, the get right opponent for a couple of teams. Last week was Chicago. If Green Bay can't find explosive plays against a unit allowing chunk plays on throws of 10 plus yards per pass, something's wrong with this Packers offense then. The Packers are, much better home team than they are on the road this season, but this matchup still tilts their way. On the flip side, Dak's dealing without CeeDee Lamb and first rounder Tyler Booker. That shrinks the margin of error here. If the Cowboys can't keep pace with explosive, this leans Green Bay, even with their line being banged up. My pick here, Michael Parsons and the Green Bay Packers. Moving on to our Monday Night Football, we got a doubleheader. And look, the first game of this doubleheader, Miami Dolphins at 0-3, New York Jets at 0-3. Look, if Justin Fields clears concussion protocol, then the plan writes itself, right? Lean on the run. Protect the football, let the defense set the tone. Breece Hall's been bottled up the last 2 weeks, so don't be surprised if Braylon Allen gets a bigger slice to jumpstart the ground game here for them. Exactly what Aaron Glenn's been preaching. Miami should get a lift if Darren Walker makes his debut, and his size, physicality matters in the red zone. But the Dolphins still feel wobbly. The Jets, they just went toe-to-toe with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers last week with Tyrod Taylor and nearly won. Add Fields plus a recommitted to the run game here. And this is the spot where Gang Green can finally finish. Bottom line, keep it on schedule, win the field position, let the pass rush, close it out for him. My pick here is ugly, but I'm picking the Jets. In our last game of the week, we got the Denver Broncos at home at 1-2, welcoming in the Cincinnati Bengals at 2-1. Bad week to be, breaking in a fourth right guard at altitude up there in Denver. Cincinnati still shuffling that spot. Rookie Jalen Rivers finished last week there, and Nick Bonito was 29.8% pass rush win rate, can flip drives on his own. Without Joe Burrow, the Bengals offensive identity is shaky. Chase Brown's at 93 yards on 47 carries. The line has allowed 10 sacks. Jake Browning looked rough in his 2025 debut. Denver has his own warts, though. Back-to-back last play losses, 27th on third down, 19th in offensive EPA. Bo Nix is 25 in QBR, plus too many penalties. But Mile High should help, settle them down. That front can hunt, for that defense. The crowd noise aids the rush, and Sean Payton can lead on a scripted, on-schedule plan against a defense that's been up and down. Bottom line, trenches plus the location for me gives the advantage. That should carry over tonight. My pick here is the Denver Broncos, and that's the slate. 33-13 and aiming higher. Drop your locks in the comments, man. Tell me where you disagree. Catch the live reactions and recap right here after the late window. Follow me on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook at Game Time with Hubb. Clips, picks, and breakdowns all weekend. This is Hubb, and this is Game Time. Let's keep winning.
Thanks for checking out this episode of Game Time with Hubb. Make sure you like and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform so that you never miss Game Time action. See you next time.